So welcome to today's webinar. So today's webinar is on community-led approaches to retrofit. It's one of a series of 3 we've been doing, and this one specifically on retrofit supply chain engagement. And there's myself, Jonathan Atkinson from Carbon Co-op, and we have Nadia.
Hi, I'm from Southeast London Community Energy.
Fantastic. Great to have you with us. And great for everyone else to be here. So just some quick admin: slides and recording will be made available via our website and YouTube. Please use chat to say hello, as Nadia said, and use the Q&A to ask questions. And we'll have a presentation by myself. There will actually be some interaction in this one, and then we'll have a chance for Q&A at the end. The learning objectives from today's session, so what you'll hear about, and I should well, we've got a couple of polls now, but I should say that the focus is for community energy groups, and it's around how and what we mean by supply chain, understanding supply chain priorities, understanding how to build a supply chain, and identifying some success factors in the development of a supply chain. And just a note again that this program of learning webinars is generously funded by Joseph Ramsey Charitable Trust. Okay, I have a couple of polls. My first poll, and you can please answer it, and you can answer one or more of these things. Where are you from? Are you from a community energy group, a local authority, a contractor, a householder, an academic? And yeah, as I said, you can be a householder and other things as well. So yeah, let us know. Give it a few more seconds. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Most people have voted. Let's share that. You'll be able to see that. So most people, so around 50% of people from community energy groups, just over. We have some local authorities as well. And we have people who class themselves as householders. That's fantastic. And then I think a couple of academics, which is fine. Okay, so the second question I have is, what kind of retrofit support have you achieved already? So to what extent does your organization engage your community with retrofit? Maybe it's not something you've done, maybe it's not something you've done yet that you're considering. Perhaps you already provide some retrofit services, maybe in able to pay or fuel poor. Maybe you're a bit of an expert in this area. Or maybe you get involved in some retrofit design for fuel poor, social housing, or landlords. Okay, so there's any and all really. So, and again, you can tick a few of those depending on what you're up to at the moment. Give it a few more seconds. People to consider. Okay, 3, 2, 1. I'll share those results so you can see. Hopefully, you can see this poll. So most people are not yet offering retrofit support, but they are considering it. And some people do provide advice in the able to pay, maybe like just under a third or just over a quarter. And then we have some people that do little bits here and there. So that's fantastic. So from that little exercise, my understanding is that most people are from community energy background, but we have a significant number of people from local authorities. And most people are relatively new to retrofit, but interested in delivering stuff. And some people already are doing a little bits and pieces. So the framing of today's session, you'll be glad to hear, is around communities engaging in retrofit and supply chain. I think there is relevance to local authorities, and I will also maybe make some comparisons to local authority engagement in supply chain. And I know that there are a number of local authorities looking to collaborate with community energy groups as well, so there's stuff in there. But great, that gives me an understanding. Just quickly then to introduce ourselves, Carbon Co-op. We're a community energy organisation, not-for-profit community benefit society, established by members, for members. We now have more than 400 members, mostly in Greater Manchester, but some around the UK. We broker access to technical services, especially in the area of retrofit, but also community, energy system innovation and advocacy policy. Our latest endeavour is People Powered Retrofit, which is a special one-stop shop one-stop shop for retrofit for householders able to pay, and that services householders paying customers in the kind of Greater Manchester and Northwest area. Okay, so Nadia, do you just want to quickly introduce Celsi?
Yeah, very briefly, just because we are not, as well versed in the details of supply chain as you guys are at Carbon Co-op or People Powered Retrofit. But yeah, we are based in Southeast London. We've been around for about 7 years, and we offer a retrofit service for the able to pay market, which is on a relatively small scale, and we also offer retrofit in the sort of funded fuel poverty alleviation areas as well.
Fantastic. Okay, so what do we mean when we say retrofit supply chain? So post in the chat, what do you think supply chain means? What is it? It's a term that's bandied around quite a lot, but what does it mean? What does it mean to you? Or what do you think it means? What's the definition? Put it in the chat. Hazard a guess. Oh, can anyone see the grey block? Oh, apologies, I will do that. That should help. Okay. Anyone? Yeah, hazard a guess. Okay. I'll move on and I'll talk about what the actual definition is when you look in various different. Yeah,
there are some answers coming in. I know that you can't see them, Jonathan,
right, yeah, and go and
to avoid that
then.
grey block. But yeah, there's people saying they think of installers and materials.
Yeah.
Connie from Croydon thinks that it's the chain from production to the endpoint. Fiona says everyone involved in manufacturing, wholesaling, installing, retrofit measures. Andrew says supply chain is companies that are carrying out the retrofit work or directly employed works and the materials needed. A few other people saying, sourcing of materials. Other people say actually it's the whole process and the whole business involved from start to finish. Fantastic. So quite a mixture of answers.
Yeah, but that's good that people have thought about it and engaged. So let's look at the technical definition. So the supply chain is the interconnected hierarchy of supply contracts necessary to procure a built asset. Managing supply chain involves understanding the breakdown and traceability of products, services, organizations, logistics, people, activities, information, and resources that transform raw materials into a finished product that is fit for purpose. So big tick to those people who thought about it in a holistic and in a wider kind of context, because it is that kind of wider network mesh of different things. It's interesting that the formal definition not only talks about people, companies, organizations, but also talks about information and resources, ultimately money, and how all that flows together. Because I think when we think about supply chain, and we've talked about different things like business models and what have you over these past few webinars, but we're looking at kind of, getting things built and everything that's needed to get things built. In many senses, there are kind of nuts and bolts and physical things, but really this is a social, technical, political construction, because it involves like money, resources, relationships, and contracts and the legal things and all that sort of thing as well. So one thing I'd like to stress as well is that often we are part of the supply chain, unless we are kind of like a householder and only operating in this space as a kind of recipient of a retrofit. Actually, we're sited within that supply chain. We're active members and participants, and often I think of local authorities and community energy organisations. They sort of think about supply chain as over there, as something someone else is doing, or some other monolithic block of usually, let's face it, builders with hard hats, and that they're sited over there. But the reality is that we're part of the supply chain, we're enmeshed in it, we're complicit in it, and that's a good thing in a way, because we all want to be part of the job of procuring and delivering retrofit. Well, at least we do anyway. So what a supply chain is, again, I think that's the other thing, is like it's not an immutable thing that again sits over there. It's about what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and where we sit within that as well, because those things will change what we mean by supply chain. And I'll come on to demonstrate that in a second. Yeah, so and again, I think like all too easily supply chain it equates to builders in hard hats and and mortar and bricks and mortar, that picture on the left hand side. But actually there are different competencies at play here. There's the wholesale and the materials and the fabrication and manufacture of those materials, and certain recent supply chain issues and logistics and all those sorts of things bring ever more closely into sharp focus, like what supply chain means in that context. I did notice that there was a factory involved in Ukraine recently bombed by Russia. This is all part of this kind of wider process. So suppliers. We also have like those technical people as well, like whether they be architects or surveyors, and a variety of other tasks and jobs there. They're part of the supply chain as well. And again, like we'll talk to local authorities or skills development agencies, and they'll just seem to focus in on builders, but it's more than that, I wanted to use this diagram. This is a diagram that my colleague Marianne drew, and this is about retrofit. Retrofit, the supply chain that sits around what's required to build a retrofit. Now, I think actually the intention behind this diagram was that, again, often we think supply chain, a householder needs a contractor, that's your supply chain, tick, box, move on. Actually, when we think about supply chain, here again, look, you can see we've got a general building contractor there in the middle. They've got subcontractors that might be specialist materials, or they might be M&E, around the services. You've got designers and advisors on the right-hand side there. Then you've got people that sit behind them. You've got, the builders merchants that supply the materials like relatively close to the site. But then you have suppliers and manufacturers that may stretch anywhere from your site to Eastern Europe and beyond, especially when it comes to like things with chips in them and all that sort of thing. You've got certification bodies that kind of have a role there, standards, quality standards, frameworks, past 2035, BAYS, Ofgem. Then you've got the designers and advisors. There'll be interactions with the planning authority, with building control, and appointed building control consultants, and you've got the professional and trade associations. So what we're trying to say here is like there are many and various different elements of supply chain. A failure within one or more of these can mean a big failure or big delay in how works is carried out and the capacity for works to be carried out. It's also like, as intermediaries, community energy or local authorities, we need a relationship often with a number of these, maybe not all of these. Maybe we don't need to have a relationship with a supplier in the Far East, but we might need to be minded of that because there might be things that interrupt that supply chain. So it's a complex web, and there's much going on. What does that mean for a retrofit team? And these are job roles that may be closely associated with a retrofit project. And a number of these are kind of new roles, or potentially roles that have existed for a while within the supply chain, but have a new application or a new flavor to them or a new use. So we have advisors, retrofit advisor or an energy advisor to give advice to householders. We have retrofit assessors, carry out assessments of properties of homes, run energy models, offer assessments and specialist knowledge. We've got contractors Obviously, the contractor, many and various, you know, they may be builders with trades, they might be multi-skilled, there might be lead main contractors with subcontractors. If they're operating in this sector, we call them retrofit contractors, but maybe they don't see themselves as retrofit contractors. Maybe they just see themselves as a joiner who does a bit of EWI or something else. We have architects, which that's a legally protected term. So there's a thing around architects. Retrofit designers is one where that we might involve a number of people, but architects often fall into that. We have building surveyors who survey and inspect properties and the fabric of those. Structural engineers, which certainly structural engineer is one of those roles where in the previous slide where you think, oh, there's a little advisor there, you know, oh, they're not going to be much involved, but actually structural engineers we find using quite a lot in the retrofit service, and they're one where they tend to be quite busy and maybe not used to working in this kind of context. You've got services engineers who would look specifically at building services, you know, heat pumps, for example, or other heating systems. Clerk of Works is a very interesting one. It's kind of a long-held kind of role within the construction industry. Clerk of Works will sit with the contractor, will be on site, will do an element of inspection, but from a contractor side, not necessarily from a client side. Like, you know, you haven't met the contractual thing, do it again. That's not a Clerk of Works. They'll be advising, you know, on the contractor side. Principal contractor, that's a legal term, and there's health and safety, CDM kind of requirements there, subcontractors. So you have like lots of different people, lots of different members. Some of them might be cited within a community energy organisation or a local authority. Some of them, many of these will be outside, but there'll be a relationship there. And we talked about how supply chain varies depending on where you're situated and what you're trying to achieve. And I think it, again, you know, when we think about this monolithic thing of supply chain, it's worth highlighting some of these things that actually vary quite a lot between different project types and what have you. So funding publicly procured work versus privately procured work. And what I mean by private is, I mean, like, are the householders paying for the works? Is this an able to pay or, you know, owner occupier sphere, or is it publicly procured works? Because the types of organizations that might work in one or the other might be quite different. There may well be overlap, and I'm aware of contractors that will work on both public and private jobs as well, and there'll be some sort of split, but they might be different. They might be very different, you know. What's the funding come with in terms of strings? What kind of accreditation and warranties are required? It might be that there's a trust mark involvement required from a public work, or an involvement past 2035. Maybe there isn't. So the types of firms involved will change. Duration of contract. Some contractors will be happy to work on longer periods, longer projects than others. Others move from job to job relatively quickly. What kind of travel to work distance is there? Typically, let's say for the private works, we'd expect a smaller travel to work distance. Some of the public works, you have organizations, companies traveling great distances, maybe not a very good thing, and there are ways to maybe mitigate that in procurement. Is it a one-off project, or are these multiple houses? Again, that's the size of the firm involved. What's the size of the contract? And risk and liability. Yeah, again, bigger organizations to an extent are able to take bigger contracts and what have you. And is the job require a principal contractor or subcontractors? How does that work? So all these kind of things will affect supply chain. I want to just dwell very quickly on the differences between a traditional contract and design and build. That's because within retrofit procurement and within retrofit delivery, there is often a tension between these two modes of procurement and contracting. And I don't think it's much understood beyond the kind of construction industry. Very, very simply, sorry, not simply, but let's say hiding the complexity, traditional contracts tend to be better for design, where there is some element of specialist design required. And design and build tends to be where the design is more functional and maybe less risky and less risk involved. And I'll talk after explaining these about what that might mean in terms of retrofit. In a traditional contract, you have the employer, the client, the householder. It says you in this, maybe the slides it was taken from, but let's say that's the householder. Then you have a contractor who's doing the work, and they might bring in subcontractors. To the side of the employer and to the side of the client, there are designers and advisors. And they might be energy advisors, energy modelers, architects, engineers, all sorts of people, CDM providers and what have you. They sit to the side of the client, they're employed by the client, and they advise and also in some sense participate in the contract with the contractor. Generally how this works is that there'll be a design delivered by probably an architect that forms part of the traditional contract, and that the implementation of that design, there'll be a role for the architect or potentially a contract administrator, could be a quantity surveyor, could be a surveyor, in ensuring that that design is implemented by the contractor. In a design and build, you get rid of all those people and you just work with a contractor. And it's design and build because the contractor is taking responsibility from an element of design. How this might look in reality, for example, design and build, we might look at a solar PV installation. So relatively simple, the design element is relatively simple. It goes on a roof, you install the inverter, in it goes. And there's less need for an architect to sit there and do a load of designs. Yeah. What an architect would be good at is something that requires a design package that's intricate, complex, has interdependencies, and requires that design element like a high level of design. Now, in retrofit, we know that projects that are more risky and require more elements placed together, external wall insulation, windows and other things, there's an interaction there. The recommendation on the PAS 2035 is that there is a designer and advisor involved. So that does change the nature and the kind of wider context for this kind of relationship. Design and build, simpler installations. And there's a discussion, I would say, within the retrofit sector about where that line is drawn, because does that mean external wall insulation? Can that be done design and build, or does that always need a designer involved? And there are other elements of that as well, where we could talk about things like heat pumps. Heat pumps generally a design and build because the heat pump installer that covers all that. So that gives you a bit of context there. And the size and makeup of the supply chain businesses really, really does vary. We have kind of micro builders that might be a sole trader, or a sole trader with like a couple of employees, well, not a sole trader, but a couple of employees. You know, the SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises, actually get quite big, up to a few £1 million a year turnover before they become large enterprises. Larger firms and supply chain frameworks, and frameworks are basically pre-procured contractor relationships from which contracts are drawn down from those networks. A particular interest of Carbon Co-op and the supply chain, the main supply chain provider of people-powered retrofit, is the RMI sector, repair, maintenance and improvement. So RMI is activities associated with the care and upkeep of a building. These are generally family-sized firms, So, you know, there might be 10, 20, 30, there could be sole traders as well. And these are people already doing work in people's homes. They might be doing loft conversions, extensions, new kitchens and bathrooms. They're those sorts of contractors. We think these are the best match really for owner-occupier retrofit works, partially because of the fact that they're usually co-located with demand, you know, within a certain locality. They're not traveling, you know, hundreds of miles across the country. But also they fit nicely into this kind of traditional design and build. They're more likely to work within a traditional contract, or they're likely to be able to work within a traditional contract fairly easily and to have those high levels of design. They're also often interested in training, you know. So what do we need from a contractor? I think this is really, really worth bearing in mind. From a supply chain entity point of view, from a supply chain intermediary, like a community energy organization, these are some of the things we need. Clarity on roles, who's doing what at what point, a job that's delivered and on time. You know, that's essentially what we're looking for here, really. Reliability, good communication, we can have those conversations, an appropriate price. And whether that is a fixed price, I think there are kind of pros and cons to that. In a retrofit refurbishment context, we need to understand that unknown things can and do happen, and there needs to be negotiation around that, appropriate within the contract, of course. That they have the appropriate skills and they're willing to engage in quality assurance mechanisms, that they have the right accreditations where necessary, might not always be necessary. Accreditations are not always the main indicator of quality, I would say. That there is trust, and there's a management of a healthy and safe workplace, that the right things are put in place to protect the workforce and, you know, and other people who might be in a home. That mistakes are rectified and that they have the appropriate insurance in place. So when we talk about engagement with supply chain, which I'll come on to, these are the kind of things that we're looking for. Like, do we have these things in place with a contractor? Can we build a good relationship with them ultimately? So what does a contractor need from you? And I think this is worth bearing in mind as well, because again, another misconception in the sector is that we've got lots of work that we need doing. There are contractors out there. We need to just tell them about them. They will come to us, you know, they'll just come. What we know and what other people who have engaged in this sector know is that supply chain is a real limiter for projects and for work. And we need to understand their motivations, their needs, their kind of position for them to come in and work with us. Because unless we meet this side of things, they'll look at us and go, well, I've got other work to do. You know, it's a tight workforce. I've got other things I could be doing. Thanks, but no thanks. From a contractor point of view, what they're looking for from clients and from intermediaries is appropriate expectations, that we're not asking for the moon on the stick. We're asking for something that they can do and they can meet the needs. They can meet that job. So yeah, to be commissioned to do work that they can do. Respect, and I think respect is a really, really important thing here. Again, from the class dynamics that you see within this industry, from the relationships, you know, often respect is lacking, and that goes both ways, I would say, you know, from supply chain out and into supply chain as well. I've seen some terrible attitudes that people have about builders and contractors, and really, you know, contractors do a good job, deserve respect for the work that they do. They'll want reliability from our side. They'll want good communication. They'll want an appropriate price for the work that they'll be doing, and they'll want and expect a profit from that. And again, that's not something that should be judged. These are small business people, these people running businesses and employing people, and, you know, it's appropriate they'd be rewarded for that work and be able to resolve it. They'll want cash flow as well, and I think that's important in scheduling work and in scheduling how supply chain is dealt with, because the biggest cause, I would say, of of contractors going out of business, and it is a risky business, it can be anywhere, is not having the cash flow. It might be that the work's there, but they don't have the cash in the bank and they can't service their outgoings. They'll want trust. They'll want good clients, basically clients that understand and are realistic about what they're asking for, and understanding of key deadlines and timescales as well. Really super important, you know. Again, I think there's a lot of well-documented mistakes and quality issues within the sector, and a large number of them can be put down to unrealistic deadlines and timescales, often driven by government, you know, and I don't think government are aware of the impact, the deleterious impact unrealistic timescales has on work. I mean, I know a lot of people talk about Preston, about Fishwick Road project. We've been out there and talked to people, both contractors and householders, and I know that due to unrealistic timescales, there was a contractor who caused the poor quality works there, who was recruiting people from the local fish and chip shop because the timescales were unrealistic. It was work, there was free money, and it went out the door. And the residents, the people living with the consequences of that. Okay, so what does your supply chain look like? Here's another chance for people to reflect and to post in the chat. It may be that you don't have a supply chain, that's totally fine, but tell us, if you do, what your supply chain looks like. Is it lots of little organizations? Is it one big one, or is it one little one? You know, do you employ supply chain within your own organization, or do you look to go outside? Nadia, if you could read out the chat as people use it. So what does your supply chain look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've just got a few bits coming in slowly. We have a question from
go on then.
Zizi Chef,
Yeah.
I think. So how long after a project of say £2,000 should a client allow for snags to emerge and to pay for the final instalment?
Yeah, I mean, often that comes down to the contract. There will be the lay person's terms, a snagging period. That might be 6 months, it might be 12 months. We've run retrofit projects with 12-month periods. There's practical completion and final completion on a traditional contract, and the period in between practical and final for one of our projects was 12 months. The reason for that being that ideally you want a heating season so that people can see kind of the impact of works. Now, a £2,000 project suggests like a lower amount of work and a lower scope of work. So depending on what it is, it might be quite substantially reduced from that. It may even be a few months or a few weeks, even depending on what it is, you know.
So it depends very much on the technology. We had another comment from Michael saying that there's another form that's a variation of design and build, and in that the client employs an architect and often other consultants to produce the design concept. The responsibility is then novated to a management contractor for detailed design and delivery. So I think that's all we've got so far. Oh, another message coming from Chris. Their supply chain is mixed, so they've got a mixture of local SME builders and installers. Principal contractor is a non-local SME. Nick is saying that they have a hybrid of they deliver their own in-house internal wall insulation using their internal team, and then they contract out services that are not delivered in-house. So they've got an aim to create local, upskilled and dependable workers in supply chain.
That's great. And yeah, that kind of mixed approach, I mean, potentially, obviously very context dependent, but that kind of mixed approach seems to be, to me, to be quite robust, because you have then a number of organizations of different scales. You can cover different sizes of projects. There's the potential for subcontracting between supply chain entities there. And also you reduce risk as well, because if you're too reliant on a single contractor, then what if they go bust, or what if they get busy, or what if they go away?
Yeah, Zizi is saying that they have used a sole trader advisor / designer and a sole trader builder as well. So very, you know, small scale in comparison.
But potentially that's the right way to start. You know, if you're building expertise and building a track record. Yeah, great. Do you want to talk a little bit now, Nadia, about Celsi?
Yes. So just building on what you said there, obviously we've got quite a mixture of attendees that have very varied supply chains. We thought that it would be useful just to highlight how our supply chain has developed and how it's worked in comparison to people-powered retrofit, because it's been done on a much smaller scale. And it is of the type of supply chain where we would say it still needs a lot of work to be able to deliver a robust retrofit service. We feel like we've been able to deliver one part, which is giving the advice and telling people what to do, but not necessarily enable them to actually get the work done. So that's something that we're working on, but we've come across some sort of barriers, which we thought we have to be honest and upfront, and we have to mention these barriers. Of course, people are going to learn from it. So our project on retrofit, especially for the able to pay market, has been developed over the past 2.5 years. So relatively new working in this area. The main focus when we set up the project was we knew that there was going to be a lot of client data that we were dealing with. So we were focused on creating a really robust CRM system, so we could see bookings that were coming in. We could make sure that we kept it in an orderly way, and that all our clients' data was neat and very easy and accessible for the retrofit coordinators to be able to see what related to who, and have all those contact details on hand. So I think that was an off-the-shelf solution, part of our website package, really straightforward, really easy to set up, but definitely crucial if you're going to set up a service where you're dealing with homeowners and one-to-one clients. In terms of our team for actually delivering the advice, we have trained a lot of our retrofit coordinators as they've been working. So we actually had members of our team who were energy advisors, advising people on fuel poverty and how to lower their bills, had a bit of a background in the building space, or were interested in the building space. One of them was an architect, the other one had been working, you know, previously in various areas of insulation, acoustic insulation, I think, to be specific, but they trained to become retrofit coordinators while they were working at Celsi. The good thing about that is, you know, they had all the information to hand, and they got that course done and dusted and got qualified, and there's not many retrofit coordinators around the country. The problem with that was actually we weren't part of a network where they could get advice and input from more experienced retrofit coordinators. We did have a more experienced retrofit coordinator in the team. For various reasons, he had to leave the team, and I suppose after he left, we didn't have that person who had the, you know, long industry background and history to rely on, so we did find it a little bit harder. In terms of a learning network for our staff, WhatsApp has been a really good network. I know they're in WhatsApp groups and they ask various questions and answers. If anyone in here is on any of those WhatsApp groups, please do share the link so we can all join them. But there's also various groups like Facebook. We've set up a UK retrofit group on Facebook for homeowners and installers, and everyone in between, to ask questions and give advice, and that's been really, really helpful. in terms of how we procure our work, it's very different across the able to pay market and the grant funded market. We find very much that the grant funded market already has a bit of a system set up. The local authorities are clued in on how this system works. And because it's being done to past 2030, past 2035 certification level, there are lots of steps and there's lots of order in place. For the able to pay clients, there's not so much, there's really not, from what we can see in our areas, much of a supply chain or much of a system in place. So it is very much a case of we're having to go and start working with our local authorities now to build that local supply chain, especially engaging really smaller SMEs and sole trader builders in this space. So I think that covers it for us.
Great, thanks very much, Nadia. Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Carbon Corp supply chain and now moving into people-powered retrofit. And I suppose, and some success stories or some factors rather. I suppose the thing to highlight here is that Carbon Corp really, I mean, our actual project kind of longevity is longer than 10 years. We started in the late 2000s, really. So we've got a certain level of awareness from contractors and from other people as well. The other thing is like having a customer relationship management database, CRM, you might hear it termed quite a lot, and an onboarding system that informs QA and a rating process as part of that. And I'll come on to talk about that. I'll just show you a slide next. The next is having a newsletter and information network. I think this is really, really important that that we form a bit of a hub for information and awareness and knowledge and expertise on retrofit in this area, so that contractors acknowledge that, oh, right, these people are people we can go to. And it's hard to underestimate the usefulness of being there in a sector as the kind of useful person. I think especially, I mean, Carbon Corp and people are retrofit for household stuff. We get people from all over the country, and it's a really useful kind of building for that side of things. But on the contractor side, you want to be seen as a kind of expert there, someone to come to, because it builds both kind of your supply chain, but also your kind of profile in the sector as well. Training offer has been really important for us. Especially during lockdown, we did a number of CPD, continuous professional development webinars that were incredibly popular, and really putting experts in front of contractors is really powerful. And we were running webinars by the end with hundreds of people in them on topics from, external wall insulation, triple glazed windows, air tightness approaches, all sorts of things. That's again, it positions yourself as your organisation is trusted in this area. Also done peer learning events, done events like in the pub before COVID, and we're about to do another one in June, getting people together. Great opportunity for them to learn from each other and to get to know each other, but also for you to understand supply chain network priorities. I'll not forget the one we did, the last one we did before COVID was so important, because we got to hear from contractors about how hard it is to do retrofit work for owner occupiers, and the kind of things that drives them insane, and the reasons why some of them won't come back again. And so understanding that is really, really important. And you just don't get that, from surveys and what have you. You get that from meeting people and talking to them. We also run a WhatsApp group that's been useful in the past as well, as Nadia says. And for us, procurement, we've done direct procurement. And I think it's important to view supply chain as useful for services you're involved with, but also for clients and wider kind of stakeholders. There's a kind of use for being a trusted source of information, a broker within the sector as well, because you're seen, there's a value to that, and you're seen as an organisation that enables that. This is a slightly odd looking flow diagram, but essentially what I want to show there is, well, here you've got the different stages of supply chain engagement and procurement. And this is like an example of a two-stage procurement. And then you've got the CRM that sits alongside all this. So we have engagement, you know, we're just engaging with contractors, meeting them and what have you. Then you have onboarding, you know, so engagement's one thing, but onboarding is collecting a certain amount of data that helps you understand the contractors, map where they are, understand their needs. Stage one for us is essentially forms part of the first stage of procurement. So the first stage is just getting some simple information. The second stage is more around understanding the quality, assessing them and their quality, and also assessing their skill set as well. And that enables us to then say, when you progress into a second stage of procurement at a later stage. So quality assessment, we generally do by asking people to give us references of past works that they've done. So we get an understanding of what they've done, who they've done it for, and if necessary, go and talk to the references as well. Secondly, the skills assessment there. People-powered retrofit, we do training providers provision as well. So it helps us to understand what skills they have, at the moment, but also what they need and whether we can provide that or whether other people can provide that. It's like first stage, they go on to our system as kind of ready for procurement. The second stage is actual procurement. So there's a job that needs procuring, here's some work. We'll go out and say, would you quote for this? You know, you've come through our system as well. There's then ongoing QA. So as we inspect work, or we get feedback from on contractors, that comes back again. We actually have a traffic light system that we use internally, not externally. That internally we say, you know, is there any red flags on this contractor, or are there any amber flags? Have there been quality concerns in the past or concerns about, you know, other things? I'd also say the onboarding stage and stage one, we're also looking at things like company's house data, seeing what's on a company, whether they've got any judgments against them, you know, whether there's a series of firms that individuals have been involved with, because it's a bit of a warning sign that this kind of contractor will be ideal to work with. Next, so we have a load of case studies that are on the People Powered Retrofit website, which I'd say people to go and look for. I think these are really important because, again, it kind of highlights that what's going on with the contractor. You know, they have lots of things behind them, and there's a story there. They might have come into the sector, they might have transitioned within construction into something else or what have you. So I think it's really, really, I mean, have a look at these, but also it's worth understanding from your engagement with contractors what their story is, you know, where they've come from. I've got a video, but I don't think I'd like to have more time for Q&A. What I might do is play this at the end, actually, so if people want to hang around, they can listen to it or watch it.
The construction industry is going.
There's me not doing that. So we'll have Q&A now and then play that video at the end. But so key learning. Learning. I think the key is relationship building with supply chain and all elements. Understanding that supply chain are businesses and that they want to get something out of this relationship, and understanding what that is. And good information and clarity on roles is super important in terms of like maintaining those good relationships and building them as well. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation, aside from the video that we'll play later. But do we have any questions? I actually saw something in the Q&A when you were talking, Nadia, that I'll address now. But if anyone else has any other questions or points, use this as an opportunity to put them into the Q&A. So Phil says, the BAE's evaluation of the supply chain demonstrators. And so Carbon Co-op People Powered Retrofit was one of 6 supply chain demonstrators that BAE's funded from 2018 to 2021. And there was an evaluation of that program that was published last autumn. And as he says in there, he said there were a number of issues raised. The cost of past 2035 as a deterrent to contractors and homeowners. That good contractors are too busy to be interested in retrofit. That good contractors are put off by retrofit by previous government schemes. That the actual costs are much higher than energy assessors. The actual costs, I think maybe actual costs as post in reports and assessments in reality turn out to be higher. So I can, and would you like to comment? And yes, I would. There's some really great kind of points raised there. Let's go through them. I want to deal with number 3 first, actually, that good contractors are put off by retrofit by previous government schemes. This is very, very true. So one of the main barriers that we face when we talk to contractors is, oh, you're one of those people, are you? This is one of those schemes. Publicly procured schemes tend to really screw over subcontractors. They tend to use managing agents, and the managing agents tend to pass risk down to subcontractors. They also tend to squeeze costs down to subcontractors. You typically see a pattern where subcontractors are engaged on low or piecemeal rates, where the training they receive is not commensurate with the tasks they're asked to do. And you'll often see big schemes come into an area, and when they leave not a positive legacy of trained and confident contractors, but a desert of people that no longer want to work on green schemes. So I think, yes, due to the procurement of past schemes, there's a real trust issue there that needs to be overcome. One of the things we try and tend to say is that we're not like those other schemes. This people-powered retrofit isn't a publicly procured scheme. This is owner-occupiers, and we focus on that side of things because it's a huge trust. And that's not picked up just by us, it's by other research in the sector.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, we've seen this amongst homeowners as well, especially recently with how the Green Homes Grant was administered. Homeowners have gone through that process and applied and not heard back on their application, and now gotten upset with retrofit in general. Again, when we've been working with landlords and estate agents will get tons and tons of adverts and lots of scams actually about funded measures, and we'll go in and talk to them about what's available and be like, oh, another one of those schemes. So yeah.
Good contractors are busy. Retrofit, the way to pitch it to contractors is it's a high value service that they can, it's another string to their bow. It can offer them an opportunity, some interesting work, rewarding work that will pay off in the long term. Now, that needs to be positioned within this context of like, the clients can be bad, and you can be asked to do stuff that isn't your skill set. So it's about getting those success factors right earlier in the process and ensuring that it's good jobs for contractors. Past 2035, I don't think there's any way to deny it. It is pushing up costs in certain areas. We don't actually accredit within past 2035. We're harmonized within it. We use full SAP assessments and retrofit designers and what have you. But there are costs associated with past 2035 for an owner-occupier context that don't make sense. I don't think past 2035 makes total sense at the moment for owner-occupiers. I think it could do. We're part of the advisory panel for past 2035. And you were saying about, costs. Often costs that are in assessments are different to those when they get on site. That's true. We spend a lot of time trying to make our assessment home retrofit planner update costs, make sure people are aware of the different on costs and prelims that might be there, make people aware of things like VAT and changes to VAT as well. So that sort of thing. Chris asked about the best way to build up a network of good installation contractors. I would highlight this slide here. So this slide, there are a number of different things that we've done that has built supply chain over time, from like customer relationship, basically gaining contacts and building contacts over time. So you're not just having conversations that are lost, developing yourself as a trusted intermediary and a source of quality information through a newsletter and other information, being able to offer training, either formal or CPD, some sort of brokership of training. And it might be quite light, I see you from a local authority. It could be that you're just like signposting or creating or some kind of pathways to training. running, simple networking events, business networking events, and yeah, getting involved in procurement. So I don't think there's one single answer, but it's about engaging on a long-term, sustained period of time with contractors, offering many and various different support measures, gaining their trust. And I think from a local authority perspective, it's about doing more than simply procuring work, which sometimes local authorities get into that kind of thing.
So
go on
just to build on that, Jonathan, there's a question from Tony for us about how we're engaging with local authorities to build a supply chain for the able to pay market. We very much found, what Jonathan has said is very correct. You need to have long-term relationships and long-standing relationships and build those up over time, and have a focus on network. So what we're doing with local authorities at the minute is very, very early stage. And we already have a good relationship with the energy teams and the sustainability teams within our local authorities, and we're just bringing them together with universities and colleges, and unions of builders to try and get together a program. We're not sure what that program is going to look like yet, but we're thinking about perhaps an event where you have a meet the contractor event, so contractors can both network but also see that there are customers out there that are interested in this space. We also talked about having kind of locally branded like support network where they can access training and qualifications and various bits like that, and also working with colleges and universities to embed training into their programs, because there has been a lot of funding that's come out recently around green jobs, and making sure that they're kind of offering the students the opportunities to eventually move into this space and have more supply in this space. But that is one of the longer term solutions. So we've not found the right way to do it yet, but it's just having that conversation, and we found that our local authorities are really supportive and do want to do this but don't know how to do it yet.
And I think I would say is that there is a job of work around procurement for local authorities that where social value clauses can be used and need to be used wisely, I think, not as a blunt catch-all tool. And another thing I would say about procurement is testing and piloting is really important in this area. Again, there's this dynamic which is short turnaround, short time, got to get it done, deadlines, which I understand, but where possible, it's about testing stuff out over time, and community energy organisations such as ourselves can be powerful intermediaries for those kind of exercises. Last question from Philip: where do you think responsibility lies with the use of sustainable and high-performing materials? For example, trying to implement circular economy practices and ensuring optimal material value and potential reuse, enhancing not only supply chain but value chain. I mean, I think it's a really good point. I mean, there's a lot of interesting work doing in the sector around things like embodied energy and like non-toxicity as well. People like Letty, AECB, all sorts of people. Ultimately, it's down to who specifies the work, but also it's taking a step back. It's about procurement of public works as well, and integrating these things into programs, really, because they're just not at the moment. There's maybe a minimal stuff around safety, especially around fire risk, but it's not, the specification materials isn't rippling down and isn't incorporated into things like PAS 2035 at the moment, and it should be. So part of that comes from government and procurement, part of it's down to people specifying and ensuring they have the appropriate kind of knowledge and expertise to do that. We're now at time, so we have to say goodbye, I'm afraid. I said I would do this, so I will I'll play us out with our video. Anything you want to say, Nadia, before we finish?
Just a big thank you to you for putting, this presentation together. I think everyone's found it really useful from the comments. We have one more event in this series, which is next week on Monday at 1 o'clock. Again, that is the final event that we've got, and I've put the link in the chat session. We'll be talking about community outreach and engagement in retrofit, so how you can get the word out to people so that they do something about retrofit. But yeah, thanks very much for that, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Nadia. This is just a short video, 2 or 3 minutes long, about supply chain that Carbon Corp made. So yeah, we'll take it from here. Thanks, and see you next week.
The construction industry is going to have to tackle these issues, whether it wants to or not. So I think why not jump on it now? And after all, it is a pressing issue.
We've got a real challenge in the UK. We've got loads of homes here. They all need upgrading and improving, all made better in terms of their energy performance. And that's going to mean a lot of skills, a lot of people, a lot of contractors.
By 2050, we've got to have retrofitted all of our existing housing stock, 80% of which is still going to be standing. That means that there's 500,000 houses per year that need to be retrofitted in the UK.
Everything's retrofit. An extension is retrofit. You're building an extension onto an existing house. But if they don't use the technologies that are available to upgrade the energy efficiency of a property, then they're losing out, and they'd be daft not to.
We've got so much work to do in terms of retrofitting the UK's homes, and if you want to stay ahead of the game in the construction industry, you're going to have to get into retrofit. It's a way of future-proofing your business and getting really interesting, exciting work.
People-powered retrofit helped me to find work. More than anything, they helped me to understand what kind of work there is and how it could be done.
Anyone who works in domestic retrofit has difficulty finding clients, and lots of clients have difficulty finding builders, and we're working as an intermediary to try and make sure that clients and builders can work together.
We can offer contractors good clients, training opportunities to network with other builders as well as clients, find subcontractors, things like that. And also we can offer contractors really good technical advice. So if you're struggling with a particular thing, you haven't used a material before, we can give you loads of advice on site and off site.
As a homeowner, I obviously don't want to damage the fabric of my house, and I want to achieve the best results possible, so I end up with a lovely, warm, efficient, cosy place to live.
Best bit of working in retrofit is to see contractors who are working in the construction industry already learning new skills and new competencies and really getting to grips with retrofit and energy efficiency.